San Diego Pacific.
Houston, yes, clear.
Loud and clear.
Pacific.
4423 live, we'll get the mobilization.
On the intercom. C7?
Yes, ma'am, we'll be clear, and 233 will be clear on it, and for E. Edward, and so we both be at 50.
You are listening to an emergency broadcast. Stay on this frequency. The following information is confirmed by multiple sources and is not speculation. Reports are coming in tonight of a large-scale military incursion across the southern border of Texas. For the past 2 hours, scattered gunfire and explosions have been reported in the vicinity of Laredo, Brownsville, and El Paso. At first, many believed these were isolated skirmishes or incidents of cross-border violence. But within minutes, the reality became clear. This is an organized assault. Eyewitnesses describe convoys of armored vehicles crossing the Rio Grande under the cover of night, supported by drones and aircraft. Local law enforcement is overwhelmed. Emergency services have been instructed to stand down in some areas, unable to reach those caught in the fighting. Sirens continue to wail across border towns as families abandon their homes, rushing north in vehicles or on foot. Highways leading out of the Rio Grande Valley are already gridlocked, headlights stretching for miles in the darkness. Military analysts are calling Texas a primary target zone. The state holds massive energy reserves, critical air bases, and major transportation hubs. If Texas falls into enemy hands, the consequences for the entire United States would be devastating. Already, refineries along the Gulf Coast are being shut down to prevent sabotage. Port authorities in Houston and Corpus Christi have suspended all operations. This is not just a border conflict. This is war breaking out on American soil. The Pentagon has issued a statement urging calm, while confirming that rapid response units are being mobilized from Fort Hood and Fort Bliss. Fighter jets have been scrambled to secure the skies, though unverified reports claim that several border checkpoints have already been destroyed by precision strikes. Civilians in affected areas are urged to remain indoors, seek shelter away from windows, and conserve food, water, and fuel. Emergency alerts have been sent to phones across southern Texas, warning of possible blackouts and communication outages as infrastructure comes under attack. For those listening right now in Dallas, Austin, or San Antonio, the situation is fluid and may escalate further north. What began as scattered reports has turned into a full-scale military invasion. The sound of distant artillery is now being picked up by live feeds near San Antonio. This broadcast will continue to provide updates as they come in. Stay tuned, stay alert, and most of all, stay safe. This is not a drill. This is not an exercise. Texas is under attack. You are still tuned to this emergency frequency. Updates from the southern border of Texas continue to pour in, and the situation is deteriorating by the minute. Heavy fighting has now been confirmed along multiple crossing points. The most intense clashes are reported near Laredo, where columns of enemy vehicles forced their way across the Rio Grande under the cover of artillery fire. Witnesses say bridges were destroyed within the first hour of the assault, cutting off both escape routes and supply lines. Smoke rises over the riverbanks as military helicopters hover low, exchanging fire with advancing ground units. Brownsville has become another major flashpoint. Local authorities describe chaotic scenes as civilians attempt to flee north, while gunfire echoes through the city. Emergency shelters are already at capacity, with thousands of families seeking safety wherever they can. Reports indicate that several neighborhoods are without power after substations were struck by artillery. Residents are improvising, hiding in basements and abandoned buildings as the sound of explosions rattles windows across the city. In El Paso, the battle is no less fierce. Early this morning, long-range rockets struck industrial zones near the outskirts of the city. While official casualty numbers remain unconfirmed, eyewitness accounts suggest that entire blocks have been reduced to rubble. The roar of armored convoys has been heard moving through the desert toward the city, forcing military and law enforcement to coordinate a desperate defense. Refugees are crossing into New Mexico in large numbers, leaving behind everything they own. Military sources tell us that Texas National Guard units are engaged in close combat across multiple sectors. However, they are heavily outnumbered. Radio transmissions intercepted earlier tonight indicate coordinated movements by enemy divisions, with drones and air support guiding their advances. In some areas, American troops have been forced to retreat deeper into the state, regrouping near fortified positions outside San Antonio and Corpus Christi. The human toll is already immense. Hospitals in McAllen and Laredo report being overwhelmed, treating both soldiers and civilians with limited supplies. Doctors are operating by flashlight, and some facilities have begun rationing critical medicines. Ambulances are unable to move through certain zones due to heavy shelling. As a result, countless wounded remain trapped in collapsed buildings and burning vehicles. Civilians attempting to flee north face growing danger. Highways such as I-35 and Route 281 are jammed with traffic, and there are reports of vehicles abandoned on the roadside after running out of fuel. Panic spreads quickly through these convoys as rumors circulate about advancing enemy troops cutting off escape routes. State troopers and volunteers are working tirelessly to maintain order, but many fear the exodus is only just beginning. The sound of war is no longer confined to the border. Distant artillery has been heard as far north as San Antonio, and spotters report flashes of light on the horizon near Corpus Christi. Texas, once seen as a buffer zone, is rapidly becoming the front line of a conflict that could engulf the entire nation. This is no longer a regional crisis. This is the opening battle of a war on American soil. Stay with this frequency for continuing coverage. What we are about to report may shock many of you. In a move that has already ignited controversy nationwide, federal authorities in Washington have announced that, for the time being, the United States military will not intervene directly in the ongoing battles along the Texas border. The official statement cites the need to avoid an uncontrolled escalation with foreign powers, warning that a full-scale mobilization could trigger a wider conflict across the continent. This declaration has sent shockwaves through Texas. Just hours ago, the governor delivered a televised address from Austin, stating firmly that the state will stand its ground with or without federal support. Texas will not surrender, he declared, his voice strained but resolute. If the federal government refuses to defend our borders, then we will defend them ourselves. His words were met with thunderous applause from supporters, but also with fear from millions of civilians now realizing that the responsibility of survival may rest entirely in their own hands. Across the nation, reactions are mixed. In New York and Los Angeles, many see restraint as the only way to prevent a global war. But here, in Texas, the mood is very different. Residents feel abandoned, left to face advancing armies without the full might of the United States behind them. Already, volunteer militias are forming in Houston, Dallas, and San Antonio, answering the governor's call to arms. Men and women who just days ago were teachers, farmers, and office workers are now preparing to fight with whatever weapons they can find. Military analysts warn that this division between Washington and Austin could prove catastrophic. Without federal coordination, supply chains are fractured, reinforcements delayed, and intelligence scattered. While Fort Hood and Fort Bliss remain active bases, their deployments are limited by new directives from the Pentagon. Soldiers stationed there find themselves in a moral crisis: obey federal orders or defend the state that houses their families. Reports suggest some units are already ignoring commands from Washington, choosing instead to reinforce Texan positions along key highways and oil fields. The sense of betrayal is growing. Civilians interviewed in San Antonio expressed disbelief. One woman asking through tears, "How can the United States leave us to die? Aren't we Americans too?" Her words echo the confusion felt across the region. Social media is ablaze with anger. The hashtag #, Stand with Texas, trending globally within minutes of the announcement. Meanwhile, enemy forces continue their advance. With each passing hour, the lack of a unified defense strategy becomes more apparent. Cities along the border are falling into chaos, while Washington debates political consequences. The world is watching, and the message is clear: Texas now stands alone. For many here, this is no longer just a battle for survival. It has become a fight for identity. The border war has transformed into a test of loyalty between state and nation. And tonight, the fracture lines are beginning to show. This is the voice of a divided America, and the outcome of this division will shape the course of the conflict to come. Stay tuned. More updates will follow. As the border battles rage on, the chaos is now spilling deep into the urban centers of Texas. Houston, the nation's fourth largest city, has been thrown into disarray. Earlier this evening, port operations along the Gulf Coast were completely suspended. Cargo ships anchored offshore have either fled toward open waters or remained stranded, abandoned by their crews. With refineries shutting down, the skyline that once glowed with industrial light now flickers in darkness. Rolling blackouts sweep across entire districts as substations are struck or overloaded. Eyewitnesses describe fires spreading through neighborhoods, with fire crews unable to reach them due to blocked roads and ongoing looting. Dallas is facing its own nightmare. Sirens wail endlessly as residents scramble for shelter in basements, underground garages, and subway stations. Supermarkets were emptied within hours. Shelves stripped bare as thousands rushed to stockpile food and water. Long lines stretch outside gas stations, with reports of violent clashes breaking out between desperate citizens. Police forces are stretched thin. Many officers have abandoned their posts to protect their own families. The city, once a thriving hub of commerce, now teeters on the edge of lawlessness. In Austin, the political heart of Texas, the atmosphere is no less volatile. Protesters gather outside the state capitol, some demanding stronger action, others pleading for negotiations. The governor's pleas for calm are drowned out by chants of defiance. Gunfire has been reported in several districts, not from invading forces, but from civilians turning on one another in the scramble for dwindling resources. Emergency hotlines are overwhelmed, and residents are urged to rely on community networks for protection and survival. San Antonio, located dangerously close to the advancing front lines, is already under partial bombardment. Distant flashes illuminate the horizon as artillery strikes target military installations. Families huddle in storm shelters, their radios crackling with fragments of this very broadcast. Hospitals are overflowing, hallways lined with the wounded as generators struggle to keep the lights on. Doctors describe the situation as beyond catastrophic. The refugee crisis grows worse by the hour. Tens of thousands of Texans are attempting to flee north, clogging highways into Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana. Many are forced to abandon vehicles once fuel runs dry, continuing on foot with only what they can carry. Makeshift camps have sprung up along interstate rest stops, families sleeping under overpasses and in fields while temperatures drop during the night. Aid agencies warn that supplies will run out within days if convoys cannot break through. The psychological toll is immense. In Houston, a child was heard asking his mother if they would ever see the sunrise again without smoke. In Dallas, volunteers gather in candlelit churches, praying as the sound of distant explosions echoes outside. And in Austin, where lawmakers once debated policy, citizens now debate whether Texas can survive without help from Washington. The once vibrant heart of America's South is collapsing under the weight of invasion, fear, and abandonment. These are no longer isolated skirmishes. Texas's cities are unraveling, one by one. This is the reality tonight. Chaos in the streets, silence from Washington, and the growing sense that time is running out. You are tuned to this emergency frequency. The following update reflects the grim reality unfolding inside Texas tonight. While invading forces continue to press northward, an equally dangerous threat has emerged within the cities themselves: the collapse of social order. With police forces stretched thin and federal assistance withheld, the vacuum of authority has opened the door to chaos. In Houston, armed gangs now patrol entire neighborhoods. What began as opportunistic looting has escalated into organized control. Eyewitnesses report convoys of pickup trucks mounted with stolen weapons, enforcing their own rule over gas stations, warehouses, and intersections. Ordinary citizens attempting to secure supplies are being turned away, or worse. In some districts, the gangs distribute food in exchange for loyalty, presenting themselves as protectors even as they tighten their grip on frightened communities. Dallas faces similar unrest. Groups of heavily armed civilians, once neighbors, now clash in the streets over access to scarce resources. Abandoned supermarkets have become battlegrounds. Shots echo through the night, and the lines between defense and aggression blur. Residents describe a terrifying new reality. Barricaded streets, armed checkpoints, and curfews enforced not by law enforcement, but by whoever holds the most firepower. In Austin, the divide between protest and rebellion grows thinner by the hour. Some citizens rally behind the governor's defiance, carrying rifles and vowing to defend the Capitol at all costs. Others, disillusioned and desperate, have begun calling for surrender, believing resistance will only bring more death. Skirmishes between these rival groups have already erupted, leaving casualties in the very heart of the city. The once unified cry of "Stand with Texas" now fractures into competing voices of survival. San Antonio, already scarred by bombardments, now struggles with lawlessness in its outskirts. Families traveling north are ambushed on rural roads, their vehicles seized by roving bands of deserters and criminals. The sheriff's office admits it can no longer guarantee safety outside the city core. For many, the highways once seen as escape routes have become gauntlets of violence. The civilian population is increasingly arming itself. Gun stores, already stripped bare, have given way to makeshift trading posts where ammunition is exchanged for food, fuel, or medicine. In some neighborhoods, ordinary citizens have formed local militias, erecting barricades with sandbags and abandoned cars. While some succeed in defending their homes, others become targets, drawing attention from both gangs and advancing enemy patrols. Hospitals and shelters, overwhelmed and unprotected, are now vulnerable to looting and violence. Desperate patients describe intruders storming medical centers, taking painkillers and leaving staff defenseless. In Houston, a children's hospital was evacuated under armed escort after threats from a gang seeking fuel for their vehicles. Doctors and nurses now work in secret locations, tending to the wounded in basements and churches. The fear is no longer just of invasion. It is of neighbor turning against neighbor, of survival measured not by unity, but by dominance. Texas is being torn apart from within, even as pressure mounts from outside. The sound of war may come from artillery and gunfire, but the silence of law and order is just as deafening. Tonight, the Lone Star State faces not only an invading army, but its own collapse into anarchy. As fighting intensifies and order collapses, the highways leading out of Texas have become rivers of humanity. From Houston to El Paso, from San Antonio to Dallas, millions are on the move, desperate to escape the encroaching chaos. What began as scattered evacuations has now transformed into one of the largest internal displacements in modern American history. Interstate 35, stretching north through Waco and into Oklahoma, is completely gridlocked. Drone footage confirms lines of cars extending for more than 50 miles, unmoving for hours at a time. Families sit inside overheating vehicles, rationing the last drops of water as temperatures climb. When fuel runs dry, cars are abandoned on the shoulder, belongings strewn across the asphalt. Entire stretches of highway resemble graveyards of stalled vehicles, their occupants forced to continue on foot under the relentless Texas sun. Rest stops and gas stations, once safe havens for weary travelers, are now scenes of desperation. Long lines form for fuel that rarely arrives, and when it does, tensions boil over. Witnesses report fistfights, armed disputes, and theft as crowds struggle for every gallon. Bottled water and canned food disappear within minutes of delivery. Aid workers attempting to distribute supplies are overwhelmed, sometimes attacked by those too desperate to wait. In smaller towns along the escape routes, local resources have been drained dry. Shelters designed to house hundreds are crammed with thousands. School gyms overflow with families sleeping on concrete floors, sharing scraps of food and warm water when it can be found. Generators hum until the fuel runs out, leaving the air heavy with heat and the cries of children echoing in the darkness. Medical services are collapsing under the strain. Clinics along the highways report running out of bandages, antibiotics, and even clean water. Volunteer medics work with whatever they can find, sometimes performing surgery by lantern light, with car batteries powering makeshift equipment. The most vulnerable, the elderly, the sick, and infants, are suffering first. Stories spread of people dying not from bullets, but from dehydration, exhaustion, and lack of medicine. The refugee convoys are not safe. Armed groups, some criminal and others simply desperate, have begun raiding travelers. Families speak of roadblocks set up by gangs demanding food, money, or weapons in exchange for safe passage. Those who refuse risk losing everything, or worse. State troopers attempt to escort some convoys north, but their numbers are too few and their presence too scattered to protect the vast tide of people fleeing. The psychological toll is immeasurable. Parents whisper reassurances to children they can no longer protect. Friends are separated in the crowds, entire families vanishing in the chaos of evacuation. In Oklahoma and Louisiana, refugee camps are swelling beyond capacity, straining resources of states unprepared to receive such numbers. Officials warn that unless federal assistance arrives soon, this humanitarian crisis could spiral out of control. Texas is no longer just a battlefield. It has become a state of exiles. Millions of its people, once proud of their independence, now wander highways and back roads in search of safety that feels increasingly out of reach. This is not simply a war. It is the collapse of daily life, the unraveling of society, and the displacement of an entire population. Just hours ago, in a speech broadcast from the heavily guarded Capitol building in Austin, the governor of Texas issued a stark ultimatum to Washington. With enemy forces advancing, cities falling into chaos, and millions displaced, He declared that unless federal intervention begins within the next 12 hours, the state of Texas will consider all available options, including a formal declaration of independence. The governor's address was brief but explosive. Flanked by state officials and guarded by armed volunteers, he spoke directly to the people of Texas, saying, "We will not stand by while our families suffer and our cities burn. If Washington will not defend us, then Texas must defend itself, even if that means standing apart." His words sent shockwaves not only across the nation, but around the world. Crowds gathered outside the Capitol erupted with chants of both support and defiance. Some cheered the possibility of independence, waving Lone Star flags and calling this a historic moment for Texas. Others expressed fear, warning that such a move would only deepen the crisis and provoke even harsher retaliation from invading forces. Political analysts describe the ultimatum as unprecedented. Not since the days of the Civil War has a state threatened to break away under such circumstances. The governor's 12-hour deadline has created a ticking clock, one that now hangs over every decision made in Washington. Will the federal government intervene militarily or allow Texas to chart its own course? Inside Texas, the threat has emboldened militias and civilian defense groups. Leaders of armed communities in Dallas and Houston released statements pledging loyalty to the governor, promising to fight under the banner of Texas rather than the United States. In rural areas, volunteer groups are already printing makeshift flags and distributing them at roadblocks, declaring that Texas stands alone. But not all share this vision. In Austin, protesters clashed outside the Capitol, some accusing the governor of reckless brinkmanship, others demanding immediate independence. The divide runs deep. Is Texas still part of the United States, or is it becoming something else entirely? Meanwhile, Washington has yet to issue a direct response. Official sources remain silent, aside from a brief statement urging unity and condemning any talk of secession as irresponsible. Behind closed doors, however, it is believed that federal officials are scrambling to contain both the invasion and the political firestorm. Intelligence sources suggest that military commanders stationed in Fort Hood and Fort Bliss are now uncertain where their allegiance lies. Do they follow Washington or Austin? International reaction has been swift. News outlets in Europe and Asia describe the ultimatum as the most dangerous fracture in American unity since the 1860s. Some foreign powers view it as an opportunity to exploit, while others fear it could destabilize global security altogether. For ordinary Texans, the ultimatum is more than political rhetoric. It is a lifeline. Many believe that only by breaking free can their state survive. Others fear that independence would leave Texas even more isolated, facing invasion without allies. What happens next is uncertain. What is certain is the deadline, 12 hours. By this time tomorrow, Texas may either be fighting alongside the United States or declaring itself a nation under siege.
Out there, yes, clear. Loud and clear.
Pacific.
On the intercom. C7?
Yes, ma'am, we'll be clear, and 233 will be clear on the N4 E Edward, and so we both be a 50.
Washington still hesitating, the governor of Texas has shifted from issuing warnings to taking decisive action. In a televised address broadcast across emergency channels, he told the population, "If our nation will not defend us, then Texas must defend itself. Every citizen, every town, every family has a role to play. We will stand together, or we will fall alone." The message has resonated deeply. Across Dallas, Houston, Austin, and San Antonio, civilians are answering the call. Local community centers and school gyms have been converted into training grounds. Volunteers, farmers, office workers, teachers, and students are learning to organize into local defense units. Firearms, already widespread in private hands, are being distributed along with instructions for coordination and communication. Makeshift militias adopt codes and signals, patrolling neighborhoods and critical infrastructure. State National Guard units, previously constrained by federal orders, are now openly coordinating with civilian militias. Fort Hood and Fort Bliss have become operational command hubs for the state, dispatching reconnaissance teams, securing supply lines, and stockpiling food, water, and ammunition. Tanks, Humvees, and armored vehicles are deployed to strategic points, while engineers work frantically to reinforce bridges, highways, and key intersections against advancing forces. The governor has also issued guidance to civilians on emergency protocols. Families are instructed to prepare evacuation plans, secure safe zones, and ration supplies. Radio broadcasts provide continuous updates on troop movements, safe corridors, and potential threats. In an unprecedented move, the state has created a network of volunteer communication hubs, ensuring that even in the event of blackouts, information can reach remote towns and rural communities. Propaganda posters, once used for training exercises, are now posted across cities. Texas stands alone, stand strong, fight smart. Social media, where accessible, spreads instructions, updates, and warnings in real time. Citizens are forming neighborhood watch groups and coordinating logistics for food, water, and medical care. Churches, schools, and municipal buildings serve as distribution points and shelters for those caught in the chaos. The threat of independence is no longer theoretical. The governor's advisors are drawing up contingency plans for declaring sovereignty, issuing passports, and even establishing a provisional government should the federal response fail entirely. Political staff work around the clock to outline economic, legal, and defense measures, ensuring that if Texas steps onto a path alone, it can survive long enough to resist occupation. Despite the fear, there is a sense of purpose. Civilians, once powerless observers, now find themselves actors in their own defense. Militias march alongside National Guard units. Engineers reinforce bridges, while teachers teach civilians basic medical care. Children and the elderly are moved to safer locations. Every action, every effort, feels vital as Texas braces for the next phase of the conflict. For the first time in modern history, a U.S. state is preparing to operate independently in the face of invasion. Texas is mobilizing not just its military, but its people. And the world is watching every move. You are tuned to this emergency frequency. The invasion of Texas continues, and the front lines are moving deeper into the state's heartlands. Reports from reconnaissance units indicate that enemy forces have broken through several defensive positions along the southern corridor. Armored columns, supported by drones and artillery, are advancing northward, pushing through towns once considered safe. Checkpoints hastily set up by local militias and National Guard units have slowed the enemy, but not stopped them. Roads once clogged with refugees now also carry the sounds of battle. Engine roars, gunfire, and distant explosions echoing across the Texas plains. Houston, despite weeks of preparation, is under severe pressure. Militias have engaged invaders in suburban neighborhoods, erecting barricades with vehicles and debris. Gunfire lights up the night, and smoke rises from warehouses set ablaze to deny enemy supplies. Civilians remain trapped in shelters, praying that defensive lines hold long enough for evacuation routes to remain open. Hospitals are overwhelmed, treating wounded fighters and non-combatants alike, while generators strain against the growing demand for electricity. Dallas has experienced sudden incursions into outer districts. Civilians report seeing enemy drones scouting entire neighborhoods, coordinating strikes with precision. Volunteer militias fight back with small arms and improvised explosives, but the invaders' technological superiority is evident. Entire streets are deserted, buildings abandoned, and panic spreads through the city like wildfire. In Austin, the governor's office coordinates defensive maneuvers while issuing emergency updates. Civilians are called to fortify positions, secure supplies, and assist in logistical efforts. Yet even here, chaos is mounting. Some militias clash over strategy, while others are forced to retreat under enemy pressure. Communication lines intermittently fail, leaving residents in the dark about which areas are safe. San Antonio faces bombardments along the outskirts. Explosions shake bridges and highways, cutting off critical supply lines. Convoys attempting to reach the city are intercepted, forcing desperate reroutes. Refugee camps along the main roads are under threat, and volunteers scramble to relocate the vulnerable to secondary shelters. Those unable to move remain at grave risk. Across Texas, the psychological toll is apparent. Families that have fled the initial border clashes now witness the enemy at their doorstep. Fear and fatigue mix with determination, creating a tense, fragile resolve among civilians and fighters alike. Even as Texans prepare for independence, the reality of invasion tests their resolve. Every town, every street, every building could become a battlefield. Despite these challenges, pockets of resistance continue to hold. National Guard units coordinate strikes with militias, setting traps and ambushes to slow the enemy. Engineers rig bridges and roadways with obstacles, and civilians assist by relaying messages and scouting movements. Small victories, however fleeting, bolster morale in a state teetering between chaos and survival. Texas is under siege, its people tested like never before. The enemy advances relentlessly, but the spirit of the state remains unbroken. Every moment counts, and every action may determine who survives this unprecedented assault. For the first time since the invasion began, reports indicate that several key positions are being reclaimed. Along the highways north of Laredo and Brownsville, local militias, working alongside National Guard units, have launched coordinated counterattacks against occupying forces. Utilizing intimate knowledge of the terrain, volunteers set ambushes, disable vehicles, and sabotage supply lines. Their actions, though improvised, have slowed the enemy advance and allowed previously trapped civilians to escape to safer zones. In Houston, neighborhoods that were under enemy control have been retaken through a combination of urban guerrilla tactics and community-led resistance. Civilians, many of them unarmed at first, have coordinated with armed militias to reinforce barricades and recover strategic buildings. Factories, warehouses, and bridges, once lost, are now back under Texan control. Their recapture a testament to the determination of ordinary citizens refusing to surrender their homes. Dallas has witnessed similar successes. Volunteer reconnaissance teams guide strike units through abandoned streets, relaying enemy positions and weaknesses. Improvised explosives and precision strikes target armored columns, forcing them to retreat or divert. The collaboration between trained soldiers and motivated civilians has created a dynamic, unpredictable defense that even the invading forces struggle to counter. Austin, the political heart of Texas, remains a hub of coordination. From fortified command centers, the governor's staff directs operations, assigning civilians to vital roles: communication relays, supply transport, medical support, and intelligence gathering. Civilians have become the backbone of the state's resistance, demonstrating courage and ingenuity in the face of overwhelming odds. Every successful countermeasure, no matter how small, fuels a growing morale across the state. In San Antonio, ambushes along key highways and outskirts have disrupted enemy logistics. Volunteer drivers deliver supplies under fire, while engineers rig detonation points and obstacles that slow armored vehicles. Refugee convoys, once trapped and vulnerable, now move with guidance from local defense units, reaching safer zones in record time. The combined efforts of civilians and soldiers illustrate that even in the face of superior forces, strategy and determination can turn the tide. Reports suggest that the enemy is increasingly frustrated. Their supply lines disrupted, morale weakening, they face a population that refuses to yield. Every recaptured town, every reclaimed checkpoint is a message. Texas will not be taken without a fight. Across radio transmissions, citizens are urged to remain vigilant, support local militias, and report movements of enemy forces. The psychological impact of these countermeasures is significant. Civilians who once felt powerless now feel a renewed sense of agency. Families defend homes, neighborhoods coordinate strikes, and local communities provide intelligence that even professional soldiers cannot replicate. This widespread civilian involvement has transformed the conflict from a conventional battle into a total defense effort, a people's fight for survival and sovereignty. Texas is pushing back. Its citizens, once trapped and desperate, are now the driving force of resistance. Strategic victories, both large and small, signal that determination, courage, and unity can reclaim what was lost, even in the darkest hours of war. Stay tuned. Updates will continue as Texas fights not just for territory, but for its very existence.
Houston, NPS, clear. Loud and clear.
Pacific.
2423 live, we'll get the mobilization.
On the intercom. C7?
Yes, ma'am, we'll be clear, and 233 will be clear on the N4 E Edward, and so we both get a 50.
After weeks of chaos, battle, and displacement, reports indicate that key cities and towns have largely been secured by combined forces of the National Guard, local militias, and determined civilians. Houston, Dallas, Austin, and San Antonio are no longer under immediate threat of occupation, and supply routes, though fragile, have begun to function again. Emergency services are resuming operations in some districts, and temporary shelters are being reinforced to protect thousands of displaced citizens. The governor of Texas has addressed the state in a historic broadcast. Speaking from a fortified command center in Austin, he acknowledged the sacrifices made by both civilians and military personnel. "You have shown the world what it means to defend your home. Today, we are no longer simply surviving. We are taking control of our future." His speech signaled a shift from reactive defense to proactive governance, outlining steps for both security and political sovereignty. Among the measures announced, a statewide mobilization to maintain security and rebuild infrastructure, creation of provisional administrative bodies in liberated regions, and the formal organization of civilian councils to coordinate local governance. Roads, hospitals, and supply chains are being prioritized, and volunteers continue to play a crucial role in restoring order. Every success is amplified by the morale of a people who have endured siege and chaos, forging unity from adversity. At the political level, the governor has taken the first tentative steps toward independence. While not declaring secession outright, he has instructed his advisors to explore legal, diplomatic, and economic avenues that could allow Texas to operate as a sovereign entity if federal intervention fails. This includes drafting proposals for international recognition, reaching out to global organizations such as the United Nations for support, and preparing contingency plans for independent governance. International observers are watching closely. News outlets report on the unprecedented resilience of the Texan population, noting that civilians have played a central role in reclaiming their state. Early diplomatic communications suggest cautious engagement from foreign governments, largely emphasizing negotiation and humanitarian assistance rather than direct intervention. The situation, while tense, positions Texas as a state asserting its right to self-determination amid extraordinary circumstances. For the people of Texas, the future is cautiously optimistic. Streets once echoing with panic now hum with activity as communities rebuild, militias stand guard against remaining threats, and emergency networks distribute food, water, and medical care. The refugee crisis, though still severe, is slowly being managed, with organized relocation and relief efforts stabilizing the population. The Lone Star State has survived the initial onslaught. Its citizens have proven that determination, courage, and unity can withstand invasion. Now Texas looks to its future, not only as a defender of its people, but as a potential nation, ready to claim the sovereignty it has fought so hard to protect.